The Toronto Maple Leafs are headed to Boston on Tuesday on the brink of elimination, down 3 games to 1 to the Boston Bruins. To talk more about what could potentially be some really bad news for the Toronto Maple Leafs, let's head to the Maple Leafs practice facility and bring in Mark Masters. Mark, Auston Matthews not on the ice. Now, ordinarily, that's not a huge deal because we can call it a maintenance day. But when we looked at the line rushes, they didn't just have a placeholder in there for Auston Matthews. It looked like that could be the top line that we see come Tuesday night. What are the chances Auston Matthews plays in the game on Tuesday?
Well, I don't know that. It's impossible to know without kind of getting a better feel for exactly what Auston Matthews is going through. We know he is traveling with the team today. So that's a good sign, at least on that side. Now, you mentioned the line rushes today. When Auston Matthews missed Friday's practice, they just had a placeholder in his spot. It was Connor Dewar, who was going to be a healthy scratch in the game, that skated on the top line. Noah Gregor was on the top power play unit. So instead of doing that today, they prepared as if Matthews is going to miss Game 5. They at least gave them some reps to know that what would it be like if he's not in the lineup in Game 5. Max Domi, who we saw take Matthews' spot on the top line as the top line center at the end of game number 4, was back there today, skating between Tyler Bertuzzi and Mitch Marner. Of course, Marner and Domi, former junior teammates in London, so there's some built-in chemistry there. So, Sheldon Keefe says they're remaining hopeful. Of course, they're staying hopeful. They're hoping he's going to be able to play. They're hoping he's back to himself. But there's at least a real chance here, Gino, that they may be without their best player as they face elimination.
We don't know what the injury is, but there is some concern around what Sheldon Keefe said. After game number 4, Keefe said, and I want to quote him here, not one of those run-of-the-mill, everyday type of illnesses. The effects have lingered and gotten worse when he gets on the ice and is asserting himself. Do we have any idea what's going on? And it certainly does not sound optimistic if every time he skates hard, he feels worse, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's so hard, right? We don't know the nature of the illness, but he's had it for a while now, right? The first time that we found out he was dealing with something was Wednesday ahead of Game 3. He did not take part in the full team skate. He wasn't able to get on the score sheet. And remember, he's coming off one of the best games we've seen him play in Game 2. 3 points, game-winning goal, was dominant, best player on the ice. So, he didn't have the same pop in Game 3. And then you thought think about it, this has been a pretty slow part of the schedule in the playoffs. They had 2 days off after Game 3 and now 2 days off going into Game 5. So the mere fact that it's still an issue does raise some concerns. And I can tell you that the teammates, the players that were talking to the media today, they were answering questions, as if Matthews wasn't going to play. Like they were willing to go down that road where they didn't say, let's wait and see. Max Domi said we're going to keep it in-house. That was the closest we came to that. But John Tavares was answering questions about Domi joining the top power play unit. William Nylander answering questions about that. Giving full answers, sounding as if they're expecting that to be the case in Game 5. So there's a lot of little things that add up that make you think there's a real possibility here that Matthews may have to miss Game 5.
Yeah, and other changes, not just on the top line. You mentioned John Tavares. The captain was a little short today when you guys tried to ask him about the injuries and how much that's affecting the play on the ice. And he also started playing back again with Nylander. And this is a scenario that we see whenever Sheldon Keefe has found the Leafs needed a boost to somehow get their offense going, he gets Nylander and Tavares on the line. Is that what you're expecting to see in Game 5 on Tuesday?
Yeah, and I think that's what you have to do without Matthews is you kind of have to load up. Boston's going to have the last change. You know that Marchand is likely going to be out there against the Marner line, although we'll see. Maybe they change up the matchups with no Matthews. Pasternak likely to get the Tavares line, and Tavares has really struggled to generate offense 5-on-5, hasn't hit the score sheet in that department yet in this series. It's been tough, obviously, being matched up against Zach and Pasternak, the most offensively dangerous line in theory for the Boston Bruins, even though it's been Marchand carrying the load in terms of points for them in this series. So, yeah, I think that's what they're going to do. They had hoped coming into this series that they were going to go with the spread offense look. That's what they were game planning for down the stretch. They really thought that was a way to exploit their depth advantage, that having Nylander on that third line and then bumping him up for shifts every now and then. And then, of course, Nylander misses the first 3 games of the series with this undisclosed issue. And now this Matthews thing comes up. It's just been a lot of tough timing and bad luck for the Leafs in this series. And now they're going to have to load up, it would appear like, if Matthews is out.
Okay, so the offense has been nowhere. They're scoring less than 2 goals a game when they were scoring almost 4 goals a game during the regular season. So let's get past the offense. What about their own net? Ilya Samsonov got the hook after 40 minutes when he gave up 3 on his 17 shots. Joseph Woll came in, stopped all 5 shots that he faced. Is it Woll or Samsonov on Tuesday night in the absolutely must-win situation?
It looks like Woll. Everything that we saw today, everything Sheldon Keefe said suggests that Joseph Woll will be the starter in Game 5. Woll did not stay out late at the skates, which he had been doing in the past in this series when he's been the backup goalie. Sheldon Keefe pointed to special teams and goaltending in particular as areas that the Leafs need to improve in. He said they haven't been getting the saves at critical times, and the other team has. I asked him about Joseph Woll getting thrown into this series against Florida last year. Very similar, actually. Samsonov got hurt in the middle of Game 3, came in relief, and then made the start in Game 4 with the Leafs facing elimination against the Panthers, and Woll responded well, got the win in Game 4. Started Game 5, of course, they lost that game, but I don't think it was on him. So it certainly seems like it's going to be Woll. I spoke to Samsonov away from the cameras, and he said, listen, it's when you're a goalie, sometimes the goalie's the easiest thing to change, and he understands that, and he's just going to try and keep his mental game where it's at. He doesn't want to get too down. He wants to keep preparing as if he's going to play, but he sounded like a guy who's not playing, and the way Sheldon Keefe spoke, it sounds like Joseph Woll is going to get the start in Game 5.
It's amazing how much this team has had so much success in the regular season offensively, but so little in the playoffs. They've scored 2 or fewer goals in 10 of their last 11 playoff games, Mark, and their power play just 1 for 15. In a way, we kind of say this is a small sample size. Maybe the Leafs can turn it around, but this is not a small sample size. This is who the Leafs have been. Why do we see such a dramatic inability for this team to score come postseason?
It's hard to understand, Gino, and we've seen it before. They had the best power play in the league in February, clicking at 50% with different personnel out. Remember, Riley was suspended. They had some issues in that month where they changed things around. Tyler Bertuzzi replaced John Tavares for a string of games on the top unit, and they just kept clicking. And then it went cold down the stretch, as we've seen many times in this era. I was keeping a close eye on their power play work at today's practice. Mitch Marner looked up at me and said, no videoing, Mark, you're going to give away all our secrets. Clearly, they have to change something. And we saw Max Domi on the top unit today. They think that he'll help. His speed, his playmaking can be an asset. Obviously, without Matthews, who led the team with 18 power play goals, that would be a bit of obviously a big setback on the power play. But at this point, maybe something like that shakes them up because they seem to be in their heads a little bit on the man advantage. Certainly in Game 4, they could not get anything going. That first power play early in the game when Boston gave them a gift with a too many men on the ice penalty. Boston wins the faceoff. Marchand takes the puck down the ice and spends 30 seconds in their zone. There was no urgency there. Sheldon Keefe called it the most disappointing part of that Game 4 loss, and there was a lot to choose from there. It's hard to know. They worked a bit on retrievals today. They don't feel like they've been able to get to those loose pucks. The Bruins have been very good when they're in their structure. They got to find a way to get Boston out of their structure, out of position to get some more clean looks, which they haven't been getting. The only goal that they scored on the power play in this series was John Tavares in Game 2, the only game they won in this series, which was kind of a broken play. They were changing units. The puck bounced free to, Matthews set him up in the slot, and he just hammered it home against Linus Ullmark. So Swayman hasn't allowed a power play goal to the Leafs in this series. And we know all the storyline there about how maybe he's in their head. So I don't know. There's no answer to this. They would have, if there was an answer that they had stumbled upon, they would have changed it long ago. We've seen different assistant coaches, mostly the same personnel, but they just, at this time of year, it has not been able to come through for them, and they've badly needed it.
So, Mark, what are they looking for here now to stay alive? What do they need to do? Like Jeremy Swayman, you mentioned the fact that maybe he's in their head. He's got the best save percentage in all the playoffs right now. He's been unbelievable, not just in these playoffs, but historically, recently against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their power play can't score. The Bruins' power play can, so the Leafs' penalty kill is not working. Now it looks like they could potentially be without Auston Matthews. Give the Leaf fan who's listening right now something to hang on to. Is there anything out there that the Leafs can adjust, change to stay alive through Game 5?
Well, I can't really speak to adjustments, Gino, because I think it's pretty obvious what they have to do, right? Get another save, bet better on the power play, find a way to break them down at 5-on-5, maybe a little more speed through the neutral zone. Let me just say this. Having covered the Maple Leafs a long time and this entire era, when they have had a tough loss, an embarrassing loss, whatever you want to call it, whatever that Game 4 performance on home ice was, they have tended to respond. Just when everyone's counting them out, that's when they tend to have a good performance. They lose the first 3 games to the Florida Panthers in last year's second-round series, and they win Game 4 in Florida when everyone was ready to bury them. In that scenario, also coming off a 2-day break in that series, too. So I'm not saying they're going to come back and win the series, but it wouldn't surprise me if they win Game 5, if they have a good performance in Game 5. Auston Matthews missed 1 game in the regular season. They won it 7-0 against Pittsburgh. Maybe their best game of the year, all things considered. They've been in a situation where they've won 3 games in a row in a playoff series recently. They did it last year against Tampa in the one series they've won. They did it against Montreal. Don't want to bring up that series, but they won 3 straight. So they've won 3 in a row in this era in the playoffs, so they can maybe lean on that. 2018 against Boston, they were down 3-1 this core, and they come back to force Game 7. They don't get it done, but there's some things you can point to. But I can just tell you, Gino, covering this team, when it's negative, when you start to count them out, they tend to come back with a good performance.
And sometimes, Mark, as a beat reporter that you are, sometimes you get a little choked up. So you clear your throat. I know you got to catch a flight to Boston. The Leafs trail the Boston Bruins by 3-1 margin on the brink of elimination as Game 5 comes up Tuesday night in Boston.